communities to policymakers and seeking the co-production of knowledge from a more sustainable, equitable way and land use approach. Carlos Alberto Hernandez Vélez, he's also a Mexican-Colombian PhD research candidate at Lund University, and his work is focused on participatory methodologies, forest fauna management, and the politics of knowledge in Colombian Amazon. He's drawn in the Amerindian philosophies of secret plants, rituals, and his research also explore in the relational way the transformative potential from dialogues of saberes. So I invite you all, not just to open your minds, but also your hearts to this new possibility of remembering together what knowledge co-production can be. And it's actually a relational event that it does not explain things, but also moves, unsettling, revive ourselves, but also the way around us in this becoming together. So please, Jesica, invite you here now to share a little bit of your knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Taís and Agnes, and thank you, Maria and Focali, for and the Stockholm Resilience Centre for this warmly invitation. I'm going to start sharing with you what was my PhD work at Lund University as a member of the Center of Environmental and Climate Science. I did my PhD from 2020 to 2024, so I'm also recently graduated in October, and I will let you know much more. So I'm a postdoctoral researcher now in applied system science. So what we are trying to do with applied system science is how to utilize the systems thinking approach, both from systems analysis to systems modeling, into these co-creative conversations. But first, I'm going to show you. Okay, it did work before. Yes. So this is my thesis work, From Canopy to Catastrophe, Understanding the Environmental Crisis in Northern Colombian Amazon, where I managed to publish my first paper, A New War on Nature and People, taking stock of the Colombian Peace Agreement. The second one, Landscape Connectivity Loss after the de-escalation of the armed conflict in the Colombian Amazon. And I'm an environmental biologist, so I have been trained as a biologist, but through my career and my years of experience, both in the university and outside of university in the private sector, where I worked some years, I started to understand much more of the importance of relationships with the human part of what is this context. So I was really interested in socio-ecological systems understanding. Then I was lucky enough to have the best timing. When I finished my PhD thesis, the COP16 of the biodiversity was happening in Colombia. So I actually managed to publish a paper in the conversation talking about, this is super cool, Colombia is hosting the COP16, but actually we have a really delicate crisis in the Amazon happening at the same moment. So I brought attention, and I actually got some conversations with really important stakeholders at the COP16. During the COP16, I also were presenting my recommendations for my thesis, basically, on the alternative economies, so-called socio-bioeconomies, on how to solve or how to attack the problem of deforestation and degradation in the Colombian Amazon. So we were a bunch of actors together trying to brainstorm how the recommendations for the policymakers were going to happen. And then this resulted in a bioeconomy opinion piece in the second biggest newspapers in Colombia, where we actually started to talk about more about this. This is all about me. I want to contextualize my study. So I did focus in the Colombian Amazon, as I repeated in my title. And actually, the Colombian Amazon covers around 40% of the total territory. These are the all green areas are the 6 departments that cover this Amazon part. The region has obviously seen for decades, not only recently, but for decades, spikes in deforestation constantly. But the region is also characterized for a high level of abandonment, both from the government, both from specific actors, both from road infrastructure, etc. But it has the triada, as we call it, of the problems. So the social issues, unfortunately, turn out into the murder of leaders and syndicalists and also environmentalists working with NGOs, with universities, etc. The economic aspects with this high presence of armed groups creates the land grabbing, the land speculation, and very, very dark land markets, as we call them. And the environmental, obviously, seen from the side of deforestation and biodiversity loss. So just in one single slide, I want to resume 60 years of armed conflict in Colombia. So basically, for 60 years, we have the most intensive conflict in the world internally. In 2016, finally, the FARC and the Colombian government signed a peace agreement signifying the finally so-called most expected peace. But actually, what the peace agreement did was to skyrocket the deforestation rates in the entire Amazon. Why? Because the FARC were actually controlling the access to the territory. And once you removed some of these fronts, as we call them, the access to land was very much uncontrolled. So any actor could come and any actor could practically be inside the territory. And this obviously skyrocketed the deforestation rates. I really focus, so the picture on the top, the tiny one, I don't know if the pointer is working, probably not. Well, the Amazon biome, as you know, covers 9 different countries. And we have heard a lot about, obviously, the Brazilian Amazon. But about the other countries, there's not much known information. So that was one of the main keys or the aims of my investigation, how the Colombian Amazon is behaving into all these a spectrum of deforestation. So what we called in Colombia the Colombian Andes Amazon Transition Belt is now declared the arc of deforestation. There are 21 arcs of deforestation globally, and we have one of them in Colombia. So the main drivers of deforestation categorized, or at least for primary loss forest in Colombia, are those 7 that you see here. But my work was to focus specifically on 3 of them. Praderización, which is specifically the clearing of land, forest pristine land, to pastures for cattle ranching, the expansion of agricultural activities into protected areas or prohibited territory, and extensive cattle farming specifically. You have illegal crops, you have illegal mining, logging, you have all of the different drivers, but my main focus were these 3 of them. So all the red colors you see are the very high hotspots of deforestation, and those are crossing territory of basically 4 of the areas in the Amazon, the main areas. And all the greens that you see in between the reds and yellows are the national protected areas. The big one, Chiribiquete, is actually the biggest protected national park globally. It covers 4.5 million of hectares of tropical rainforest. So I wanted to focus in this area, but also I wanted to compile several critical aspects of this environmental crisis. So how cattle ranching is moving towards the protected areas, but how the protected areas are, and the actors that live there are interacting between them, and how is this dynamic working. So I try to address different aspects: land use change, deforestation, biodiversity loss, ecological implications, and the socio-ecological dynamics seen from all the actors that I will show you in a moment. What are the effects of that in the main system, navigating in a very unique characteristic of this part of Colombia, which is the armed conflict peace agreement, post-peace agreement era, which is sort of like the contextualization for me to get into how did I identify the stakeholders that I wanted to engage with. how the policy recommendations were guiding. Is it land? Is it food? Is it agriculture? How are those interacting? And then establishing new ways of integrating multi-purpose methodology to research. So not only qualitative, not only quantitative, but sort of like a multi-poly useful methodologies to communicate with all these stakeholders. This is a resume of my 4 years of PhD. So I did split my work into 4 different bubbles, let's call it. So the peace agreement is sort of like the main contextualization, but there's a bigger system. So one of the aspects was to do the systems analysis, and this is the identification part. So who is involved, how they interact, how is this working? So from the systems analysis, I got paper 1 and paper 2 in my compilation, the cattle ranching as main driver in deforestation, and systems analysis utilizing causal loop diagrams as the main methodology. Then the spatial analysis, where I did use both of satellite imagery, remote sensing technologies, and actually real overflies and photographing the deforestation state, where I identify the legal and illegal value chains of the cattle ranching in the Amazon. That's very briefly speaking. And then the last paper was this sort of like how species area relationships in conservation are related to the remote sensing and the systems analysis with stakeholders. But I will today focus a lot in the systems analysis as we are talking about waving of knowledges. As I said, I started my PhD in 2020, COVID times. So the whole fieldwork was just collapsed when COVID arrived. So I had to redesign. But that actually created this sort of virtual hybrid in-person dynamic that we all tried and went through the COVID. But basically what I started to map or try to put in place was the stakeholder participatory system mappings with the system thinking behind and the 3 conceptual modeling parts of the methodology: the definition, the clarification, and the confirmation. So for the definition, very much gathering data, identifying stakeholders, literature reviews, semi-structured interviews, virtual seminars, and in-person seminars once the rules of the COVID were lifted. Then the clarification, synthesizing all that information, preparing the causal loop diagrams, and making the systems analysis and rebooting it with all participant actors. And then the confirmation, the final workshop live definition and discussion of all the material that was done. So this is the main methodology. How did I put this together with my supervisors and all the stakeholders? Was, well, through the systems thinking influence of connecting the different issues of what a big problem is characterized. So you have to go through certain steps to try to say, this is an important global challenge. How do we approach it? So the recognizing the interactions, identifying and understanding the feedbacks, all of these different steps, we actually went into each of these identification, clarification, and validation stages. And these are obviously is a way to put everyone in the same language. And I did like the puzzle thing kind of going on to put the systems thinking into all my conversations. The theory, as I said, was behind that was the social ecological system. So it was not a way to position a people in nature and as external actor or as an external agent. It was actually all the way trying to put people with nature together. So the relationships between this, how humans are exchanging direct feedbacks with nature, that was the main message. So in order to, as we researchers like to talk, in order to identify the stakeholders or how to create and accept these different waves of knowledge, I went through this power, urgency, legitimacy of the stakeholders, selecting my group of selected individuals to go through the architecture of the definition of my system. I ended up with about 15 key people in the country. You can see here just one of the first sketches of the stakeholder analysis. So environmental agencies, government, indigenous communities, policymakers, NGOs, universities, nonprofit, all together to make these kind of mappings. This is the monitoring team with one of my closest partners, the Fundación de Conservación y Desarrollo Sostenible, where we went through different flights specifically to go to this arc of deforestation and identify all these different hotspots of deforestation. Here you can see how cattle ranching, agricultural stress is distributed and included in the landscape. And here you can see the seminars, both online and in place, that I started to create with some specific representatives in the government and in agencies nationally to discuss about the problem. So the cattle, the regenerative agriculture as a solution, and bioeconomy perspectives with very important people in the conversation. This is just a very brief diagram of how the reference behavior patterns you have to maintain in the loop. So this is the very methodological aspects, but you have to translate this to your stakeholders, your actors, or your participants. So normally you will navigate into reinforcing systems or balancing systems. So either of your leverage points will navigate and guide you through the whole system, but this requires obviously training and further discussion. We tend to think directly as when we sit together in mental models. We have all different ideas, different thoughts. We have different ways of seeing things. So the one very first thing we do with them is to sit down and drive and go and mention and post-its, etc. And this is the iteration process, the first one. Back from the workshops, from conversations, going and putting things together. The confirmation is much more into how all these different maps or the causal loop diagram serves as a purpose of communication. And then you have to go and talk to people, put them on work together, create new ones. And this I did twice in Medellin because my plan was to do it in the Amazon. But because of security reasons, logistically reasons, it was actually easier to bring the actors to a whole different city out of the context to talk together. This is just another way to show you how the process was done, but it's a repetition of the other slide. And then, oh, it's not changed. I think I can change it now. No, next one, if you can press it. Yes. So this is a validation process where you have to go through all sorts of different workshops and then you put them together. And these are like the main characteristics of why did I do it this way? Well, I wanted to catalyze collaborative efforts, and this actually sparked a very important inter-regional dialogue of innovation in the livestock sector, and it came out with a proposal for a policy brief after these workshops. Crucial research to work to influence decision makers. We have to be seated together. We have to put all perspectives together, and we have to combine natural and social sciences in order to do that. These were recommendations to support policymaking processes. One specific aspect after the COP was actually the first standards for a transparent, traceable system for the cattle ranching. And that was actually because of my thesis. I'm really proud of that. And then this is obviously a clear message and awareness to stop and halt deforestation in the Amazon tropical ecosystems, not only in Colombia, but in the biome Amazon. This is work under peer review. So this is a paper to define the 4 bubbles of the entire system. And here you have the establishment of illegal cattle ranching, the legal supply chain, you have the socioeconomic implications, and then you have the environmental consequences, the climate influence in the entire system. And finally, as I was part of the Agenda 2030 graduate school at Lund University, we had to guide our research in terms of SDGs. So we established this sort of like mini loop in how policymakers can abstract these kind of images and the negotiations based on that to the iconic SDGs, just to facilitate conversations, but to understand the problem. And then finally, this is my last slide, how to communicate that the primary driver of deforestation was cattle ranching, was the very first effort done by a researcher in Colombia. And then how to maneuver into this integrative approach was really essential for the policymakers and all actors to understand that we needed to do that. The fragmentation paper actually showed the 7 key hotspots of cattle ranching expansion. Now the government has been using those maps as well to detect it. And finally, the intersectoral collaboration and the economic incentives of the cattle ranching industry per se were highlighted up. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll be open for more questions later.
Thank you, Jesica. Thank you so much. Amazing job. So impressive. We are going to collect all the questions to the end. So I will invite Director Carlos, if you could share a little bit of your research and knowledge. Welcome.
Thank you, Jessica. Wonderful. So a very brief idea. Now we go a little bit, if that is real, a more focused conversation, but it's going to be broad. My name is Carlos. I was born in Mexico, but raised in Colombia since I was little. I was very connected to nature, so I decided to study biology, but very close to anthropology. And I studied in Bogota biology, working with insects and orchid bees, and slowly, using the anthropology question inside of my brain to ask deeper questions about Colombia, and later getting into the question like a country that is the most mega diverse territory, bioculturally diverse, and it's named after the name of Christopher Columbus. So, and it took me decades to understand it, because I was born into, of course, a system that is already colonized. So my connection to indigenous topics is an act also of a story of decolonization. And I was invited to work as an intercultural teacher in a multicultural school. I was paid by them, I was hired by them after they approved, and they said, like, if you want to teach here, you have to come and dance and drink ayahuasca and being with us in the river, in the ceremonies. And on the second time that I come to the Amazonas, we created a investigation with the community, and we created some of these images that you can see over there, which are circular calendars, that it's a door, an entrance to a very complex system that has been going in these territories for thousands of years. So I found myself later to be in Luxus Center for Sustainability in a PhD position because of this. Because it makes sense, because my mentor was interested in this, and he married to a Colombian, so that it make it more coherent. So this is what I'm here. And we connect with the topic on that we see this canopy image when we mention the Amazon. Maybe an anaconda can appear in our mind or something, but usually it's like a tapestry of greens, right? Hopefully, or sadly, what the image that Jessica showed us, maybe it's also browns and yellows. But I am interested, and many of us are interested, in the knowledges that are beneath the canopy. So this is the name of my research: Indigenous System for Forest, Fauna, and Human Management in the Colombian Amazon. Thorsten Krause is my advisor, and Guy Jackson is my co-advisor. This is an image that I took in 2015. But the story is not only about the forest and the canopy, but beneath the canopy, there is a river. And the river is super important in these conversations because of many reasons. So one of them, it connects because for thousands of years, the people that have been living and managing these ecosystems, they travel through the river by an anaconda, a huge anaconda that brought the people from a lagoon that is currently now in Brazil. And they traveled with the anaconda, and while the anaconda was traveling through the forest, it created the river. And people came out of this anaconda in different parts of the territory with different knowledges. So specialized hunters, specialized in venoms, specialized in dancers, elder brothers, minor brothers, different knowledges that are distributed until reaching the territory that we now call Colombia. And on the right side of that image, you see the agroforestry system, which is called the chagras, like also sometimes called the slash and burn, that it regenerates when they migrate and they change this location for planting their crops, and they let it rest in between 7 and 10 years, and they come back to it. So when you go through this canopy and the forest, you also see these patterns, these patches that are regenerating. For example, in this one, it's been for 3 years left to rest, so it will come back. And this is a management system from this ecosystem that has been going on for at least 14,000 years, probably more. But still, we think that we need to teach them about conservation and socio-ecological systems. And probably it's true in some cases. That's why we have a conversation. Another focus of my PhD is about on fauna, because of many reasons. Dispersion of the forest, a healthy forest. We don't want an empty forest, of course. It's impossible to have a healthy forest without animals. And because for this same amount of time, people have been eating these animals. And this is one of my interests, how people are hunting and killing these animals and distributing the meat, with what norms, with what beliefs, why not, with what tools, who can access, who cannot access, and how this knowledge has been changing, of course. And this knowledge is represented by this stool, which I don't have time to go to a traditional story that is focused for this on the origin of indigenous science in this territory. But you basically use this tool to sit down and watch what is happening in the world, to dilute gossips, and to have a clear comprehension of what is happening if you stay and sit down in this tool. And the traditional house of knowledge, which is sometimes called malocas, are the places where this knowledge is learned, transmitted, criticized, reinvented. And this is why also I brought this structure that is based for supporting things. Yeah. And it's got 3 levels: below, middle, and top. And in the center, there's a hole, nothing. And this is important also in the traditional knowledge. And you will find that this is in the center of these calendars. This knowledge, of course, has been destroyed for hundreds of years. And because of a miracle, it still survives. This is another big conversation that I don't have time to go into it. But this is the main argumentations. Of course, missionaries, Colombian nation, Brazilian nations, rubber, balata, pelts, cocaine production, violence, conflict, all have eroded, burned, criticized, and discriminate this type of knowledges. And some people still do that in Colombia, in Sweden, around the world. And probably there's mechanisms that are still working in our heads, in our bodies, for many reasons. So these are the places, the houses of traditional knowledge, that are key to understand this knowledge. And of course, as researchers in sustainability and socio-ecological systems, we need to go inside of these places to know and to get access and to start conversations about this knowledge. In this case, Ipanoré is the house for a multicultural dialogue in the Colombian Amazon. And I am using, of course, and it represents the dialogue of knowledges of how do, with my background, with my teachers, put in conversations, biologists with anthropologists, no, interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary conversations. How do I put in dialogue people that are using camera traps for monitoring biodiversity, which is nice, but solely is incomplete. In dialogue and to weave knowledges, so I'm using the multi-evidence-based approach and Maria's work also to promote a synthesized way to address the actors in the territory. And the good descriptions of the different actions that are needed, because it could be turned as a slogan. We need to weave knowledges with indigenous communities. And a slogan, you can make t-shirts and you can repeat it every once in a while, and no? But what is the container? No? There is translation, mobilization, application, synthesis, and negotiation. And inside of those actions, there are qualities of the researchers. There are challenges, there are barriers that you face. And you will have different challenges to make it happen. So it could be, how can research for sustainability advance the weaving of knowledges with indigenous knowledge systems for managing forest fauna in the Colombia's Amazon? That is my main research question, which has different specific research question. So I'm in my last year of my PhD, so I should be writing right now. But I took some time to relax and to talk to you because I need it. But I'm writing and submitting 3 papers now. One is about a systematic review on how academia has been using the term traditional ecological knowledge, also criticized or not, but still very useful. What is the status and of traditional ecological knowledge and the contributions to socio-ecological systems in the 2 communities that I'm working in? How we are doing it, which is a methodological paper on the weaving of knowledges and the approaches on the mental and the body and the colonized, me and them, and finding which methods are being helpful and what are barriers and conflicts and the big problems that we are also facing. And the last one will be scenarios and implications. Took a little bit, not as deep, or maybe it will, let's see. As you were saying, how can we together with the community see what is the future? Different scenarios for weaving knowledges for the future. How can that this look like? So I will have this. These are the images of the articles. One article on hunting patterns and community-based monitoring with the hunters, which is very related to those calendars. The systematic review, the center, which with the methodological paper on the weaving of knowledges, and the tech cases studies in one of them. So you have to wait a little bit more or write to me. I'm very interested to talk to you, to learn from you, so please write. This is the teams that we're working with and that I'm learning with. Colombia, you already know a little bit. So we're working in 2 departments, the yellow and the pink one, the Amazonas department and the Vaupés department. In the Vaupés department, in the pink one, the knowledge is a little bit more preserved because the Amazon River, in the case of the yellow department, works as a highway. So highways are very connected to changes in culture and everyone can access. And you can find everything, the beautiful, the ugly, and the wonderful things in these regions. And this also flows through the river. So in the case of the Vaupés department, the river is smaller, so less access. So I can still work with the local elder, the shaman, which is Emilio, and the families and the friends and that are working as team researchers, local team researchers, and they invite their community every month to develop topics on forest fauna management. And here a little bit less clear with the Ticuna communities in the Amazonas River, which a very particular case that they have a hunter association. After struggling for some years, they could define an association with hunters, which also at that time caused reactivity in the conservation environment. No, like how you can have an association of hunters if hunting is bad for the forest? So we have been advancing that conversation with the leading of them. So I'm managing to understand the complexity of this system in this framework, which is using the core themes in sustainability that I identify, some challenges and transversal approaches to it. So I recognize that we are talking about knowledge integration and transdisciplinary knowledge, management and governance of these biomes and socio-ecological systems is the third core theme that I identify. The critical challenges in a very synthetic way of the, see that how complex it can be, but I see that colonial thinking is directly connected with cultural erosion. And inside of cultural erosion, there are a lot of drivers that generate defaunation through different activities. And this defaunation, as a consequence, generate ecosystem degradation. And these thunder images is also an exercise because they also locally they understand the entrance of illness through thunders. That is another conversation. And the transversal approaches is participatory action research and decolonial plural epistemes. So these are like my glasses that help me to navigate this complexity. How does it look, my research? My research looks something like this. I'm in the middle, the student at the advisor in Sweden, in Luxus, and the community 1 in López and the community 2 in the Amazonas department. And I communicate with them every month to organize workshops. So those are the orange circles, me texting, sending audios, having video calls with them. And then I go when the images get close together. This is the fieldwork, FW fieldworks. When I lead specific workshops and I make some interviews and we take some walks and we solve issues together and we or either have discussions or have a closer friendship with some or distance with others. And we also present in the yellow figures like this to conferences or institutions. So they have also presented this project into their local institutions. So this is, locally is having a resemblance for this. I don't know if you can see it. I didn't plan totally for it, a little bit, I planned it, because I moved the center to make it look like this. And in these cases, I don't want this to be around me, but I am important, not because of my name or my identity, but because of how my body and the role that I'm playing in the community is, because it's like a connection of different conversations. So the center of the points in this case are important. So I'm also making a case for transdisciplinary researchers in this PhD. And of course, it takes time. The trust and the development, until I have not shown here in one community, we have to come out because there was too much trouble. And after they saying yes, some of the families, they say no. So there's also situations that don't work. This I already said. I will have to close now. So I have identified some of the variables of the socio-ecological system and their interactions, how it can be seen locally as the shaman works and mediates also troubles with the jaguars, because in one case, one hunter had to kill in self-defense one of the jaguars. That was a problematic situation that the shaman had to intervene and solve it. And this is used also with indigenous methods. I'm going to take 2 more minutes on this. One is the use of these tools that I present as exchanging research seats. We need to exchange research seats if we want to make this happen. We cannot learn it totally by sitting in these chairs. We need to go and sit in these chairs. And if we want to also learn from ourselves, they have to sit on our chairs and say like, now I understand why your eyes look, why you need glasses. No? Because you learn in the anatomical positions, you learn in the objects. Objects teach also. And also plants. If we want to understand, maybe in the case here in Sweden or in Indonesia or wherever we're working, the use of plants, in my case, yahe, tobacco, and coca are super important. And you need to access the knowledge and decolonize what you think you know about these plants, because they are forbidden here. Coca, in this case, is forbidden. You cannot bring coca leaves here. The tobacco, you know snus, no? Actually, the origin of snus is in the Amazon. Putting tobacco paste in your gums, that's come from the Amazon. And yahe, we can talk about 2 years of that plant. No? So these are methodologies, these are plant teachers that interact with the research and the forest fauna governance. And if we want to make some progress and translate the slogan into a reality, we need to get better at interacting with these objects and these plants. The participatory workshops that produced these ecological calendars are the spaces where we are weaving knowledges with the painters and the artists and the children and the hunters that discuss and decide how to categorize the animal species, which is different of birds. Animals are different from birds in their ways of categorizing fauna. Ecosystems, sacred places, forest beings, and fauna also as indicators of changes in the time of the year, but also they appear also in the dream and as signals of messages. So this is what will be containing on the methodological paper. You will have to wait for it. Knowledge is also gendered, very specialized. Woman has particular knowledge. Men have other type of knowledges depending on the management, the forest, the fauna, and the construction, or the sacred sites. And my last slide will be how to complement the local knowledge in this local cartography with the forest fauna images that you can capture with the camera traps. And the success, of course, is that the weaving of knowledges works in different ways. It's not only a translation on our interpretation into one way, but it happens in many different ways. I appreciate you for your attention. I will be happy to hear your voice or to read your message or to see you in the next session. I'm sorry for taking too much time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carlos. So rich your work, and you can see through your voice and your pictures and presentation how you care about the subject and also how careful you present it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to open for questions. You invite Jesica here as well. So for those who want to, clarify some things or go more deep in some of aspects. So please raise your hand, or online as well. We invite questions. Yes, please.
Okay. I can run around these. So we have about 50 people online so that they hear us. So yeah.
Hi, my name is Stephen. Thank you so much for the presentation and for sharing your experiences and your knowledge and the research that you did and is ongoing. I wanted to ask if you could share a little bit more about some of those tensions as being researchers who are sort of working in this context, coming in some places from, you know, a similar cultural context, but as well as trying to sort of bridge this gap between the relationship between research, traditional sort of scientific Western academic knowledge, and practices. I know you mentioned it, I think, in terms of you, Jessica, were saying like in terms of translating concepts, for example, is one thing. And Carlos, you mentioned it, you know, in terms of how to change your positionality as well as a researcher and get embedded. So I was just wondering if you could share more how you navigated those tensions that you didn't already share. Thank you.
Yes, I can start and I can answer very briefly because of time. And I thank you so much for bringing that question up. And obviously, one of the biggest tensions for me was being a woman in the cattle ranching industry. That was like the key entrance to say, who do you think you are? You are a researcher, you are a woman, you are just, you know, a Colombian that left the country and now you are coming from this position of privilege to tell us what to do. So that was obviously the first approximation. So for me, it was really, really key to try to not avoid, but to try to embrace how to solve this was to go to all of my previous professors, all of my networks in Colombia, and try to sort of like lessen out those tensions. And that is why I call the key experts. So they were actually guiding me into, you have to talk to this person, you don't have to talk to this person, and all that can be biased, of course, as researchers, but those were also ways of putting me not on target of, you know, different people. And then last comment, it was very much this like the cattle industry is a very man-dominated industry, and it's a very associated industry. Not all of it, obviously, but it's really associated to a specific group of armed groups in Colombia, the paramilitarism. So that was also kind of a question of putting myself at risk and my family. So I had to make clearance with the government and with the military in order to enter to the territories. But that was like a protocolarian thing to do. And that was the advantage of doing it online somehow. I couldn't be there sometimes, but when I went there, I was supposed to stay with the people and with the military bodies, and in the areas I was supposed to be moved. Nowadays, some of those areas are impossible to enter, sadly. But thank you for asking.
Thank you. Can I ask, where is the context on the region that you said that you are also, they have similar situations? From El Salvador.
My family's from El Salvador, but I was born in the US. And so I feel like there's always an interesting tension as like a first generation child of immigrants to, you know, so navigating multiple worlds. But I think of, I did a lot of advocacy work in minority communities within an affluent, you know, California and Los Angeles is a very affluent place, but you still have a lot of inequality and sort of having to navigate your positionality and working in different places. So there's always this conversation that happens. So I just wondering how you trying to do something meaningful and impactful that is both relevant to, I think, the work, but also relevant to the communities that you're working with, right?
Sure, thank you. So one of the things that I also see a gap and a space for civilization or our family, or you select the skill to improve or a personal level, is that we are not very good at inner development. So we don't know, even if it's super evident, our wounds, reactivities, the tendency where our mind gets stuck. People just passing by and touching a little bit, and you have a super reaction, and you have like a. And I am a super privileged, and I'm assuming that you are so super privileged lives, and we have these traumas because of their family, because of the culture, because of genetic heritage, because of unconsciousness. So that only that space, I don't see that we are making any serious commitment to this. And this is the problem because we are facing not only people in the same situation, but also communities that have systematically been violented, murdered, discriminated. So the level of the wounds are immense. If we have this reaction between each other, with them is immense. So the roles and the difficulties also surround on this place. Your perception as a man, or as your ways, or how do you look like. Sometimes it can be a block. And so what you represent, you come from a university, from Sweden. It's like, oh, why? Why do we have to trust you? There's a lot of evidence why I shouldn't trust you. So you have to recognize that you're going to face these challenges, commit, expose, be transparent, use your qualities as a self-human being, because I'm also studying myself. This is my heritage. And I believe that this is human knowledge is open for everyone. So I would say that even a person from Sweden that is truly interested in decolonizing himself or knowledges in the Amazon will be received in this region. So I don't think there is a gatekeep only for Colombians to work this, but it is a gatekeep for people that are really interested in making an inner transformation. So going up beyond the wounds of these colonial processes is a major challenge.
Thank you.
Maybe we can also hear some questions. Maybe we don't have to answer them all, but I would love to hear your voices and questions, even if we don't address them all.
Yeah, there's more coming.
Thank you very much, both of you, for great presentations, very rich and interesting. So I would like to ask you then, so it's a kind of a follow-up to what Stephen said. My name is Maria Tengo, and I'm a researcher here at Stockholm Resilience Centre. And I want to then ask about how do you become a person? So that positionality is one thing, being aware of your privilege and so on. But we were chatting before, Jesica and I, and this you need to actually. I mean, I think in my experience, often when we work with the community level, you actually need to downplay yourself as a researcher. But maybe what you had to do, Jesica, was really to, puff yourself up and become powerful. So both how you need to do these things differently, but also then how you use methods and tools to, in mixed groups, allow them to be person or make them bring out of their positions and become persons.
Yeah, definitely. The context of the research basically, put me in that spot on, okay, I have to be strong and show them that I got this and that cattle ranchers cannot against me. But actually through my training, basically, I learned the facilitator role. So as a person, both personally or professionally, this topic has been in my heart since I was really small, like as a kid. I had the privilege, another privilege in my life, who was to travel across Colombia while I was very small with my parents because of my dad's job. So I really had this opportunity to see from firsthand all the landscapes, all the struggles, all the colors, all the biocultural diversities that compose that vast country of mine called Colombia. So for me, it was really an entry point to say, wow, how can we get into this? That's how my biology heart started to grow. And through the time, I understood, okay, if I really want to create awareness, because it is a personal and a professional cause, I have to do it in this, my bubble, the academic world. So definitely in the beginning it was, my supervisors were like, oh my gosh, you're not going to make it. You're like, just narrow it down, relax. But then it was really like on contrary. If we start thinking the typical top bottom and not going the bottom up, how are we going to do this? So for me, it was really a dedicated devotion for creating this awareness about the Colombian Amazon. And when I met Focali, it was like, oh, finally, there's a network where I can just shout out, there's 9 countries forming the Amazon basin. It's not just Brazil. So all the different drivers of deforestation that we have in all countries started to be commonalities between all the researchers that I started to know. And that gave me the agency and the identity of being myself. And I actually sort of like in the context where I was all with the, cattle ranchers, the bank investors, the indigenous communities, I actually started with let's find all common ground. And I really trained, and this is a specific training, to say, okay, there's a conflict, how to solve it, react, boom, and not any power relationships to be formed. So resolution of conflicts, I think that was the main goal of all these experiences, and the love of what I was doing and the tragedies that I was looking every day through those patches of massive deforestation full with cows in very tropical areas. So yeah, that's how it was. Huh?
I would really like to hear more voices, and now that is one that is expressed.
Do you have more questions?
Yeah.
Online.
Yeah, of course.
Should you
Yes, please.
read
Can
it?
you read?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first one is, thanks so much for organizing this event. I was only able to join Carlos' presentation, which I found very engaged and insightful. I have a question regarding his cooperative methodology. Is there a specific reason why the representation of waving interactions with the local teams is framed within a linear timeline? I'm curious whether indigenous participants would agree with this representation, and if they might propose a different one, or perhaps a more cyclical relational model of time and interaction.
Interesting.
Should I read all and then, yeah? Thank you for excellent presentations, really inspiring and influential research. I have a couple of questions for Jesica. What challenge do you envision for monitoring impact at the system level? How can we ensure participatory research like this replicate and continually influencing decision-making? Congratulations for the amazing research. Thank you, Jessica. Carlos. I would like to ask Carlos, how is the process of peer checking or the interaction of bringing results back to the community and share the knowledge you are making with them, all for continuous waving? And the last one, no.
So thank you.
That last one, like, please be short on the question because we are running out
Peer
of time.
checking. How do you understand peer checking? What is he mentioning? This person mentioning?
Yeah.
Peer checking, like my colleagues in the university checking, or the community is being agreeing with.
Yeah,
Okay, I will
it's
manage.
like if
Oh, in the
Caroline
second,
is
yes,
there,
maybe.
maybe to
Nice,
clarify.
interesting. So
Yeah.
I will try to connect what you said with what
Community, so she
Maria
brought the community.
mentioned, the question. The timeline. I will go for the timeline. I used it as a simplification of time, and it goes from the left to the right because that is the bias of learning Romance languages that go from left to right. And when I'm speaking about time with them, they have also learned the left to the right version because missionaries did a very effective job in teaching them Spanish and language, and afterwards communities, NGOs have also do these timeline methodologies. So the more complex variations of methods that come from them, you need to get into deeper conversations. For example, if you want to, this is also a connection of how the self is surrounded by electromagnetic space here in the individual, or the malocas, or the things, or the places. But only this conversation, that is an initial conversation, you can do it with specialized knowers. So the indigenous knowledge is differentially distributed in a community. So deeper interpretations of time in a cycle or in a spiral would come maybe in a very small portion of the community that I'm working in. If you take the whole community conversations, they will maybe define time in a linear way, because knowledge is differentiated also in the community. So unseen knowledges or secret knowledges or deeper knowledges can be said also depending on who is present. And that changes also your role. When you're talking with them, you need to be aware, and I failed this at the beginning because I lost my training when I started. I forgot a little bit about this refined context situation. So I wanted to talk about many things with everyone, and that was a mistake. And they told me no, and then I sit down and meditated, and it's like, of course, I need to talk about this thing if I'm going to engage the whole community. And if I want to go to deeper conversations, then I can bring it at night or go with the woman in different spaces, no? So this is how the roles and my approaches were transferred in a different way depending on how I train myself. Yeah.
I'm afraid that we needed to finish, but for now, we are going to have in the next session that we are going to go deep and perhaps like address these questions. And for the online people, we are going to send to you the questions. But thank you so much for sharing. And we invite you all, it's like in 10 minutes here to go deep. And then we are going to have also Hello, Liz, Maria, Jamila, Caro, she made it, and Romina to share also their experience in the waving knowledge, and then we can have like more chatting and a more creative way to express ourselves. So thank you so much. Thank you all for the questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Taís.